For more than 150 years, the NRA has been defined by men and women like all of you, loyal, hardworking citizens who believe in defending your families and your communities and our country. RFK Jr., I call him Junior. By the way, he's radical left. Don't think about it. Don't waste your vote. We need a conservative person with common sense. This guy is radical left who destroyed New York. They're taking down all of the energy components. We have the highest, and all of New England, actually. He's a disaster. He's radical left. RFK Jr. is radical left. Reminds me of this fly that's driving me crazy up here. This fly is brutal. I don't like flies. But RFK Jr. calls you a terrorist group. You know, he calls you a terrorist group. Can't vote for him. You can't, you know. Somebody said, well, they like his policy on vaccine. The other day he said, no, he'll go for the vaccine. He's got no policy on anything. He's radical left. He always has been. His family is angry at him because he's doing this. They won't talk to him because they said, where the hell did this come from? And for some reason, he's getting probably a little bit more. Biden hurting Biden a little bit more. But we can't waste any votes. We have to make sure we win. And I'm meeting, I don't know if you read, but I'm meeting next week, very soon, with the Libertarians, because largely they have so much of what we have. You know, they're also people of common sense, generally speaking. They have a couple of things that are a little different, but we have to join with them because they get their 3% every year, no matter who's running. And we have to get that 3% because we can't take a chance on Joe Biden winning. He's the worst president in the history of our country by far. We can't have. But RFK Jr. says bad things. He calls you a terrorist group, and I call you the backbone of America. That's a big difference, wouldn't you say?
I'm not going to take anybody's guns away. My father was killed by guns. My uncle was killed by guns. I understand how generationally, that gun violence can harm societies or communities. I also understand there's more in this country and it's intolerable. School shootings are unacceptable. Mass shootings are unacceptable. We're having them every 21 hours, and that is unacceptable. Is it because of the proliferation of guns? The evidence indicates otherwise. And let me explain this. The proportion of guns per home in this country has not increased. I think it's increased by a little less than 1% since 1970. And yet the mass shootings have proliferated beyond, started since then, and now, you know, they're everywhere. There are other countries that have comparable numbers of guns. Switzerland, for example, the last mass shooting in Switzerland was 21 years ago. We're having mass shootings every 21 hours. Why is that? It can't be just because of the guns. It has to be something else. I've made a suggestion that we begin studying the other possible covariables. And this is what NIH should be doing. NIH should be studying, are video games contributing to that? There's social media, are the isolation, the alienation that people, could it have something to do with the proliferation of psychiatric drugs, particularly SSRIs?
But your position is that you have a view of the facts, or you believe empirically that limiting gun access wouldn't solve the problem, and therefore you don't want to limit gun access. I guess even before we go into all the comparative studies, what is the great concern? Is it a legal or constitutional concern? I mean, what is the great harm of trying to limit some of the gun access?
Well, right now we're in a part of history, as I said, where we're more polarized than ever. I grew up in Virginia. I spent 2 years living in rural Alabama, another year living in rural South Dakota, and I understand that there are large communities in this country and cultures in this country that feel a cultural attachment to their guns. They see that it's part of the Constitution.
So for you, it's partly how people feel about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I should mention many countries that have tighter gun access have far lower fatalities, have almost no mass shootings. And the United States has 4 times Switzerland per capita.
Okay,
we have more guns, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, Harry. If we talk sort of non-politically here, something happened that around the time of Columbine, where these mass shootings started happening. There's never been a time when I was a kid, we had gun clubs in our schools. People brought their guns. Kids brought 22 rifles to school. They weren't walking into classrooms and shooting people. Something changed. There has never been a time in human history where people walked into crowds of strangers and started killing them. Oh, you can't blame it completely on guns because the gun, at the time the mass shootings increased, there was no coterminous increase in gun ownership. It has to be something else beside that. Clearly, the enormous number of guns we have in this country contributes to gun violence. But if we cut the guns, would it end the gun violence? First of all, I don't think, particularly with the very expansionist interpretation of the Second Amendment that the Supreme Court has given, there's very little room.
That's certainly the legal reality.
We do it on the margins, and that's not going to change anything. But what it will do is it will increase the insecurity, the anger, the distrust, the suspicion of those people who feel very strongly about that issue.
Yeah.
And so for me, it does not seem like I've made the commitment. I'm not going to take people's guns.
There are now 2 debates between you and President Biden. But if RFK Jr. qualifies to be on that stage, will you still participate?
Well, I have no problem with him. I think he's really not doing well in the polls at all. His numbers have gone down a lot lately, but I would have no problem if he got whatever the threshold is. But he's very low, and he seems to be heading in the other direction, in the wrong direction. I would have no problem with it, though. If he qualified, I would have no problem.
Well, thank you very much. I think it was a very interesting day. It was a fascinating day. And it shows what a scam this whole thing is. And I think that seems to be the way almost everybody, even CNN and MSDNC, they have quotes over here that are drop the trial. Ellie Honig, this is a statement he just made, would not have even charged this case. This case shouldn't have been charged, meaning it should have never been started against me. Nicholas Chambers, lawyer at Newsmax, there's no law against securing a non-disclosure agreement. There's none. Everybody has them. Every company has them. Out of concern for your marriage or protecting your family or any other reason, they're common. Non-disclosure, NDAs. The Manhattan show trial against President Trump is a gross abuse of power. It's a disgusting spectacle, he says, and it should terrify all of us, and that's true. Jonathan Turley, Fox News, judge has failed to protect rights of defendant in requiring clarity. Trump did not violate federal election law at all. I didn't violate any law. It was a scam. Bragg cannot prosecute federal election law. It's not under his jurisdiction. DOJ declined to bring the action. As you know, DOJ looked at this a long time ago. This case that was going to be brought, which it should have never been brought, should have been brought 7 or 8 years ago. They didn't do that because they wanted to bring it right in the middle of the election, and especially since we're leading in every poll. It's a weird situation where judges allow prosecutors to refer to election violations. And as you know, the
Federal Elections looked at it, and they didn't bring anything, and it's under their jurisdiction. That was from Jonathan Turley. Andrew McCarthy. NDAs are legal in common, yet Bragg alleges Trump's was illegal. I have the only illegal NDA. It seems that Trump's crime by blue state lights was winning the election. That was my crime. I won an election that I wasn't supposed to win against Hillary Clinton. And that's not a crime. Either Republican in New York, it's not a crime. Bragg wants to prosecute Trump for federal campaign finance crime, something he has no jurisdiction to do. This is from Andrew McCarthy, highly respected. He's got no jurisdiction to do, and that the feds, who do have jurisdiction, decided not to do it, not to charge. They decided not to do it. They looked at this and decided not to do it. This was Bragg, who, by the way, didn't want to do it himself. And then when I started running, when I announced that I was running, all of a sudden it became a hot item again. This is a political persecution. Human Events editorial board, this case is a joke. Ashton Kutcher's going to pop and left to tell us that we've been bumped. I think I know what that means. The series of glorified legal pranks has seriously called into question the impartiality of the American justice system. Justice is blind, yet, unlike this case, justice is not dumb. Would appreciate it if they do the right thing. We would very much appreciate it if they do the right thing. Sean Hannity, Fox News. How did they come to this legal theory? Shows there's a problem with our legal system. We're supposed to believe in equal justice under the law, and this is not happening in America. Michael Goodwin of the New York Post, highly respected media obsession about the partisan show trial of defendant Donald Trump is obscuring a far more significant truth about him. Candidate Trump has opened up his biggest lead in the presidential campaign. Polls of battleground states, along with such evidence and such other evidence as the enormous turnout of over 100,000 people in New Jersey rally this last weekend, and dispirited concessions by Joe Biden supporters signal that we've reached a turning point in the battle for the White House. It's all a big disgrace. It's all political. Jason Cohen, the Daily Caller, respected voters told MSNBC the cases have increased their support for Trump. They went out to the voters and they say, we like Trump a lot better now because they see what's happening with this horrible witch hunt. It said, I've talked to many people who formerly identified as a Democrat. A certain voter, I won't use the name, but said they have changed their political persuasion to independent and are now looking forward to voting, very forward to voting for Donald Trump. These are people that were Democrats and they're looking to vote for Donald Trump. Trump support with the black men has surged in all 7 battleground states by large numbers. CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Zeleny said Monday that swing state voters tell him they're disgusted and tired of what's going on here with the Trump trial. Charles Compton, New York Post, had this case gone to an elected New York State Supreme Court judge, elected is the word, chances are he or she would have dismissed such a baseless political persecution or prosecution against Trump. However, acting Supreme Court justices like Juan Merchan are political appointees subject to political manipulation. That's true. While Trump is charged with fraud, it's Bragg and his political handlers who are the ones that are committing it. Andrew and Katie Cherkowski, these are high-level lawyers, very, very prominent. New York case against Donald Trump is drawing to a close, but one critical aspect seems to be missing. Where's the crime? These are 2 very powerful, very good lawyers, highly respected. Mike Davis, highly respected. This is blatant lawfare and election interference by the radical Democrats, including President Biden himself. Oh, Biden is charged, and the one circling that beautiful resolute desk in the Oval Office. Democrats do not have a case against President Trump. This is a witch hunt. This is a prosecution without a case. This is all political. This is done to damage a political opponent like a third world country would do. Jeremy Hunt, Fox News. This is about one man, Alvin Bragg, who puts his political ambition over the rule of law and the judicial system. And New York has got to do something about what's happening, because you look at Judge Engoron, you look at Judge Kaplan, what they've done, it's disgraceful. Everyone's laughing at the New York system, and companies are leaving, people are leaving, but major companies with tremendous taxpayer dollars and employers of millions of people, literally, people are leaving. They're taking their companies, and they're all watching this case, and they're watching Engoron too, and they're watching Kaplan. Tom Fitton, the Biden Democratic Party sham and the sham trial and other abuses of Trump are an international scandal that harms America, and it really does. It really harms America. It's from Tom Fitton. Our country's reputation is a shining city on the hill. It's tarnished now by political persecution of Trump. Now the whole world sees our system as no better than theirs. We're a banana republic. It's very sad. Then we have story after story about how this trial is one that should have, as they say, never been charged. It should have never been brought. And again, if it was going to be brought, it should have been brought years ago. You know, they're trying to rush to get it done before the election so that they can harm me, so they can hurt their political opponent. They're rushing. All this rush. There's no rush. These trials take forever. But this one, they're rushing it. We're here early in the morning and we leave in the evening. Now the judge wants to extend the time periods so that we can get this thing done fast before the election. It's terrible. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. That includes the other cases too, including the civil cases. And they all come out indirectly and directly. They come out of the White House and the DOJ. I want to say just one thing. I've seen some very bad news come out on inflation, on the economy, on the EV mandate, electric vehicle mandate, how crazy it is. It's going to destroy our country. It's so crazy. But I saw something today that's maybe worse than anything. President Xi of China, I know him well, and President Putin of Russia, I know him well. They're right now together working on plans where they combine, where they get together and do damage, because that's ultimately what they're thinking about, doing damage. And you take a look at what President Xi said today. He fully expects to take Taiwan. He made that statement today. That's a big statement. And I'm sitting here in an icebox. I'm sitting here listening to a case that even people from CNN and MSDNC say should never have been brought. I've been sitting here for almost 4 weeks, and we still have a long way to go. And I just want to thank all the lawyers involved, because they've been really working hard. And I'm spending a lot of time, and I'm spending a lot of money, which is what they want. They want me to spend my time and my money. And I'm willing to do it, because ultimately we have to fight for the Constitution. Thank you very much.
Are you ready? It was just announced last month. Inflation surged once again, and surged very badly. Joe Biden's inflation tax continues to take away 30 to 50% of every dollar you have. It's a 50% tax. That's what it is. Joe Biden, without any tax hikes, which he's going to give the biggest ever, has already tax hiked you 50%. It's like a sales tax, but much bigger, more painful, and more destructive, because all of the money goes to pay for Joe Biden's wasteful inflation spending, like the Green New scam. And that's what it is. It's a scam. Not one thing is cheaper under Crooked Joe's: food, gasoline, cars, trucks, rent, and mortgages. They're all through the roof. The whole country's going to hell because of this guy. He's got a 50% tax, and nobody ever talks about it, and nobody wants to hear about it. But that's what it is. It's called an inflation tax.
Biden's price hikes are killing the American dream. Perhaps most tragically of all, the 50% Biden inflation tax hits working Americans and young Americans the hardest. It also hits African Americans and Hispanic Americans like as hard as they've ever been hit. It's a massive wealth confiscation from the people who need it most and from people also that produce our jobs. Crooked Joe and his cronies are getting rich while you're struggling to get by. If you're a young person, Joe Biden has completely pulled the rug out from under you. There is no longer an American dream. He's made it impossible for you to save to buy a house or to have a wedding while simultaneously driving up the price of everything for which you want to save. The month I left office, the 30-year mortgage rate was 2.65%. Now it's almost 8%. Joe Biden is the worst president for young people in American history. The Biden inflation tax is also crushing corner stores, restaurants, and small businesses of all kinds, including those owned by millions and millions of African Americans and Hispanic Americans. They're the ones that are taking this the hardest. They're the ones that have just told Joe Biden, we don't want you anymore. Look at the poll numbers. The Hispanic Americans, African Americans don't want Joe Biden anymore. He's destroying their dream. One thing is very clear. Whether you're young or old, black or white, you can't afford 4 more years of crooked Joe Biden, the worst ever. I will end this nightmare, and we will once again have the greatest economy in history, the history of the world. Thank you.
I know that what is possible when you think with an alternative creative mindset. I know what is possible when we step outside of frozen habits. I know what is possible when we become independent. So I'm really happy right now to welcome this wonderful man on stage. So let's welcome him now, folks. Please welcome our next president, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
This is a day of affirmation, a celebration of liberty. We stand here in the name of freedom. We are committed to peaceful and nonviolent change. We must recognize the full human equality of all of our people, not just to those of a particular religion, not just to those of a particular race, not just to the wealthy, but to all of the people. We must do it for the single and fundamental reason that it is the right thing to do.
A new twist this morning for the country's most famous political dynasty.
RFK Jr.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
on October 9th in the state.
That it's time to heal a divided nation and return the power to the people. Robert Kennedy Jr.
We are told today that our nation is hopelessly divided. But I found something different as I travel this country. I have witnessed an upwelling of optimism that I've never seen before. Something is stirring in us that says it doesn't have to be this way. And so I've come here today to declare our independence from the tyranny of corruption, which robs us of affordable lives, our belief in the future, and our respect for each other. But to do that, I must first declare my own independence. Independence from the Democratic Party and from all other political parties. I haven't made this decision lightly. It's very painful for me to let go of the party of my uncles, my father, my grandfather, and both of my great-grandfathers. But my sacrifice is nothing compared to the risk our founding fathers took when they signed the Declaration of Independence 247 years ago. They knew that if their revolution failed, every last one of them would be hanged. They chose to place everything on the line. When John Adams put his pen down after adding his signature to the Declaration, he turned to those present and he said to them, sink or swim, live or die, survive or perish. From this day on, I am with my country. I'm going to make that same pledge to you today so that I can stand before you, as every leader should stand before you, free of partisan allegiance, free from the backroom deals, a servant only to my conscience, to my Creator, and to you. Every president enters office promising to unite the nation and to work with people from the other party across the aisle. None of them ever does it. They can't. They're already chosen a side. Well, I'm not going to have that problem. I'm going to build coalitions from both sides of the aisle. And except for the small minority of public officials who are actually corrupt, I'm going to tell you this secret. They too want liberation from the system that has captured them. And isn't that ultimately what we all want? Liberation from a system that robs us of our wealth, our health, our hope, our patriotism, our ideals, our freedoms, and ultimately our sense of ourselves as a good and capable people. Is healing our divided nation possible? Let's go take back our country. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American, Fight for what's right. Fight for your life.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the next president of the United States, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Austin. I want to start by thanking some of the people who appeared here today. Jonathan Moody for his music, Jessica Sutta, J.P. Sears, who my brother, who was side by side the entire COVID pandemic, one of the few people who remained funny during the pandemic. Willie D, thanks for coming down from Houston. And Ryland Engelhardt, who's given his life to giving us better food. And then 3 Texas volunteers, Kim Lindbergh, Judy Tucker, and Casey Malish. And they were part of the team. They were those are the 3 champion signature gatherers. We had an historic day today in Texas. We handed in just under 250,000 signatures. That's more than any presidential candidacy in the history of Texas and in the history of our country. The Texas legislature said, change the rules to your year at the last session to double the number of signatures that needed to be collected because they thought nobody would ever be able to do it. The pundits, you heard them from the beginning of this campaign, were saying it would be impossible for us to get on the ballot. And we got on the ballot in Texas. And if you can get on in Texas, we can get on everywhere. Texas only gave us 45 days to collect 113,000 signatures. We got more than double that. And I was just upstairs talking to the team that I was just completing the signature, and they said, we're on our way to New York tonight. Oh, because New York is the next one for us. We have 10 days now to complete. We had 45 days. The 2 hardest states are New York and Texas. We already got more than we need in New York. The DNC has done everything in their power to stop us, and they'll continue to do that, but we are going to get on the ballot in every single state, and I want to thank all of you who are part of this. And I want to say a couple of words about Nicole. When we chose Nicole, it's always, we've seen throughout our history that presidential candidates who chose unknown candidates as their vice president have historically run into a lot of problems because those people who are inexperienced in national politics, oftentimes when they're exposed to it, they collapse. Any kind of issues they have are amplified, and they end up looking bad. And I have, watched Nicole since the day of our announcement, and what she has been through has been extraordinary. Because she didn't spend her lifetime thinking, I'm going to be vice president of the United States. I called her on the telephone and said, do you want to be vice president of the United States? And she said, let me think about it. And then we had dinner about 3 nights later, and she said, I'm going to do it. And, well, I'm worried about it, and other people are, because you don't know how people are going to hold up, and you're walking into a buzzsaw where you're vilified, you're marginalized, you're derided, you're defamed, all the things that I've been through, but I'm used to it. I've been going through this for most of my adult life. But to have that all land on you in a 2-week period or a 3-week or 4-week period, and to be able to withstand it, and to come up and give a speech like that, where every time and every time I see her speak, I fall a little bit more in love with her. Because you don't see vice presidential candidates or presidential. Most of the presidential candidates we have today, they sound like they're doing a satire of Veep. And the stuff that they're talking about is inane, it's cliches, it's fantasies and shibboleths and simplifications and bumper sticker slogans. And that's not what you hear from Nicole. You hear a lecture about soils. There's no political scientist in the world that would tell you you gotta do a lecture on soils. They'll love it. Nobody would tell her to do that. Nobody would advise her. And yet she does it. And, you know, we all love her because we see the authenticity, we see the integrity, we see the compassion for other people, for the creatures with whom we share this planet. And you don't hear that from our political leaders. You don't hear that we're all part of a giant family and that the microbes are part of it. The soil is part of it. The plants are part of it. And that's what we need if we're going to start healing this country. Two days ago, I did a podcast with a guy called John Kemp. And he's a podcaster himself, but he's a young Amish farmer. And he can't have the camera on him because the Amish don't believe they only can use technology for certain purposes. But I was able to see him through a camera, but he can't use it during the podcast. And I had to promise him I'd never show the film anywhere. He's an extraordinary guy. He's a very handsome, young, 35-year-old guy with his very bright eyes and a long chin beard down to about here. And I asked him about his life, and he told me, like all the Amish, or most of the Amish, he has an 8th grade education. The Amish leave school when they're after 8th grade. But he had this extraordinary encyclopedic knowledge of the soils, of the plants, of the agricultural systems, of agricultural immunology, which he's made himself a global expert. I spend a lot of my time, because of my career, talking with scientists, with PhD scientists, with MD physicians, with people who have a lot of letters behind their name. And I love listening to them talk because they have an expertise, they have a grasp of a particular area of knowledge where you understand that you're listening to these existential truths that they've devoted their lives to understanding. And that's how I felt. I felt like I was a kid listening to a professor at Harvard because he knew so much about it. And about 15 or 10 years ago, he was a pesticide dealer. His father is one of the biggest pesticide dealers and fertilizer dealers in Ohio, in the Amish country of Ohio. And a few years ago, they began having pest problems on their farm. And they found that the more pesticides they applied, and they were consulting with professors at the agricultural universities about how to kill this pest and the next pest and the next pest. The more pesticides they applied, the sicker their plants got. The more pests came. And it happened that they rented a piece of land that was exactly parallel to the piece that they'd been treating, but this piece had never been treated. And they grew melons on parallel tracks on both, and they said, we're going to try this year with no pesticides just to see what happens. And in the area that had been saturated for years with pesticides, the plants were overwhelmed with pests. But on the tract that was untreated, that they grew melons on, not a single pest appeared. And he said it was like a knife line between the two rows of crops. And one was completely healthy, the other was decimated. And he said that prompted him and his father and his brother to go to a seminar, to a conference on pesticides, and they listened to a speaker talk about it. His father took the two boys out to lunch afterward, and they said, "We're done. We're never going to use them again." And they have now become, and he plunged himself into a study of plant immunology. He said he didn't even know that plants had immune systems, but they do. And he's now one of the world's experts on it. He has 4 million farmers who follow him. And he's developed a way of agriculture, of growing plants with extraordinary productivity without using any pesticides. And he says that they treat the pest with nutrients instead, because the nutrients will then bolster the immune system. And the native.
If I give you one message to hold in your hearts today, it's this: never, ever give up. There'll be times in your life you'll want to quit, you'll want to go home. Just never quit. I've seen so many brilliant people. They gave up in life. They were totally brilliant. They were top of their class. They were the best students. They were the best of everything. They gave up. I've seen others who really didn't have that talent or that ability, and they're among the most successful people today in the world because they never quit and they never gave up. So just remember that. Never stop fighting for what you believe in and for the people who care about you. So thank you very much. On Saturday, we have a tremendous rally, and I hope you're all going to be there. It's in Wildwood, New Jersey. There's going to be a big crowd, and we're going to be saying a lot. We'll be able to campaign on Saturday. And nevertheless, we have a horrible gag order that shouldn't be allowed. It's never been on. Nothing like this has ever happened. What you're witnessing is a first. I have some articles that came out this morning. Jonathan Turley, the predominant question in the Manhattan hush money trial of former President Donald Trump is not one of guilt, but something far more basic. Is the District Attorney Alvin Bragg's case a joke? Is it a prank? Is it a farce? On Thursday, the answers became clear. It's all of the above, but it's also an abominable abuse of our justice system and a wretched assault on the rule of law. It's Jonathan Turley, and it just goes on and finishes, although it's a long story that's brutal about this case. This case is highly unconstitutional. It's presided over by a very conflicted judge. Conflicted like I've never seen before. He refuses to take himself off the case, and it should be a mistrial. Their objective, of course, was to humiliate and smear Trump with a gossipy tale of sex that had nothing to do with the criminal charges at issue. Had nothing to do with it. Everything you've been watching has nothing to do with the case. They know that. It was a sophomoric gamble, and it has backfired spectacularly. Miranda Devine, we've heard it all before. Dems already wheeled out the scandal of 2016, and it didn't work then. Why would it work now, 8 years later? And why now, 6 months before the election? In other words, why are they bringing this case right before the election? You know, and so do I, because they're dishonest thugs. Nobody in their right mind thinks that this is what New York is, that they scare prosecutorial resources, and that they have scarce prosecutorial resources and should be spent when people are languishing in jails all over the city. DA Alvin Bragg should be spending his time prosecuting cop bashers and Jew-hating agitators. The message Democrats are inadvertently sending and voting public is that this guy is so strong that we have to cheat to beat him. Well, they are cheating to beat me. This is cheating. This is election interference. Kerry Urban, she says
Not going well for the prosecution. Highly respected young lady. Not going well for the prosecution. But when you have a rigged judge, things can go well. So story after story, these are all stories that just came out. These are all stories that are 100% that this is a disgraceful trial. And I'll be going over them with you later. How the left tried to do things to hurt Trump. I'm just going to say two things because I can't read certain words I'm not allowed to read. If I use the words, this guy wants to put me in jail. He's corrupt. Alan Dershowitz. Trump trial will go down in history as a stupendous legal catastrophe. That's the great Alan Dershowitz. Now, I'm not a friend of Alan Dershowitz. I don't know him well, but this is what he writes. This is what everyone's writing. And this is a case that should have never started. Byron York writes a fantastic article, but I have to read it very carefully because if I put one wrong word in, they want to put me in jail. Donald Trump just had an incredible legal week. Well, I didn't really because the judge is highly political and he's corrupt and he's also conflicted at a level that nobody's ever been before that I've seen. His Politico, Trump's political fate likely won't be decided by the courts after because they think the case is so bad. But again, when you have a rigged judge, bad things can happen. Very bad things can happen. I'm trying to edit this very quickly in front of you because if I mention the wrong word, they'll come out here and they'll take me out to a jail someplace because that's the way it is with this judge. He wants to show how tough he is. So this is story after story. I'll give you some more later on. They don't like it when I talk during the day because they'd rather not have me talk at all. They think they're going to get away with this. If this country allows them to get away with this gag order and the way the case is being handled, like what they're doing yesterday was incredible. It was incredible. What they did, this trial was so horrible. It's no longer justice, and it's a tremendous abuse of the New York judicial system in particular. The New York judicial system has been absolutely abused and abused terribly, and it's the whole world is watching. It's very bad. So I'll now go and sit in that freezing cold courtroom for 8 or 9 hours and think about being on the campaign. But I'll be on the campaign on Saturday at 5 o'clock in Wildwood, New Jersey. Thank you very much.
You're calling for a debate with President Trump. You have an open letter to him. I'll let you explain it.
We're both speaking at the Libertarian Convention in Washington, D.C. on May 24th and 25th. I've invited President Trump to debate. He's repeatedly said that he is willing to debate anytime, any place. He said that he specifically would debate me as long as my poll numbers are up.
You sure you want to debate Donald Trump? I mean, there are stages littered with political careers everywhere in the aftermath of people wanting to debate Donald Trump. The guy's a master debater without a question. You up for that? You ready for that?
I don't underestimate President Trump, but I think I'm uniquely able to confront him on issues that nobody has confronted him on. He has now been 4 years in the presidency. And I want to talk to him about his record. I want to talk to him about why he locked down 3.3 million businesses, shifted $4 trillion in wealth from the American workers and the middle class to this new oligarchy
I would love to see
billionaires.
I would love to see this debate.
RFK Jr. is a Democrat plant, a radical left liberal who's been put in place in order to help crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the United States, get reelected. A lot of people think that Jr. is a conservative. He's not. He's more liberal than anybody running on the Democrat side. A vote for Jr. would essentially be a wasted protest vote that could swing either way, but would only swing against the Democrats if Republicans knew the true story about him. Jr. is totally anti-gun, an extreme environmentalist who makes the Green New scammers look very conservative by comparison. A big-time taxer. He wants to tax you an open border advocate. He wants those borders to be wide open for more people to come in from prisons and mental institutions. And he's anti-military and he's anti-vet. He's an extreme liberal. He's radical left, and radicalized also are his family. They'll never allow him to be a Republican. They've said that we will not let him be a Republican. And his chief funder is the VP candidate that nobody ever heard of, except her ex-husband, who's been stripped of a big chunk of his cash. And he knows exactly what she's all about. She's even more liberal than RFK Jr. She puts herself down as a businesswoman or maybe a doctor, and actually she probably is, because she did a hell of a big number on the husband. That's her business. I guess you could say that she's right, however, because what she's done is given a lot of money to the Democrat causes and the ultra-liberal causes. She's going to be a big hindrance, because when people saw that she was selected, they realized that Junior was indeed a radical left. She's more liberal than Junior by far, not a serious person, and only a pot of cash to help her get her no chance candidate on the ballot is what got her there in the first place. I lived with RFK Jr. in New York and watched him convince Governor Cuomo to make environmental moves that were outright nasty and really bad for the state. We have the highest energy costs anywhere in the country, and that's because of RFK Jr. He was a disaster. Upstate New York was not allowed to drill or frack, as Ohio, Pennsylvania, and others ripped off New York energy. Because of this, prices have skyrocketed all over that part of the country, and frankly, it's affected New England, it's affected everybody. But all of this was the policy of RFK Jr. He doesn't want any drilling whatsoever. He doesn't want anything. He wants everything to come to a halt, and you'd find that out. But the fact is, he is a radical left person. So Republicans, get it out of your mind that you're going to vote for this guy because he's conservative. He's not. And by the way, he said the other night that vaccines are fine. He said it on a show, a television show, that vaccines are fine. He's all for them. And that's what he said. And for those of you that want to vote because you think he's an anti-vaxxer, he's not really an anti-vaxxer. That's only his political moment. He said it the other night. He's okay with the vaccine. Their energy costs are the highest in the United States, in New York State and New England, because of this guy, with the exception of California and Gavin Newsom, who's the worst governor in the state's history and one of the worst governors in the history of our country. I'd even take Biden over Junior, because our country would last about a year or two longer than it would with Junior. It would collapse almost immediately, and his family, a radical left, a crazy left, a bunch of lunatics, would take over, and our country will die very quickly. So RFK's views on vaccines are fake, as is everything else about his candidacy. He is not a Republican, so don't think you're going to vote for him and feel good. He's a radical left Democrat. Let the Democrats have RFK Jr. They deserve him.
You're calling for a debate with President Trump. You have an open letter to him. I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, we're both, Eric, thanks for having me, first of all. We're both speaking at the Libertarian Convention in Washington, D.C. on May 24th and 25th. I've invited President Trump to debate. He's repeatedly said that he is willing to debate anytime, any place. He said that he specifically would debate me as long as my poll numbers are up. My numbers now in the latest Quinnipiac poll and the CNN poll exceed the 15% threshold. We also have just done the biggest poll of the campaign. Typical polls, Eric, are around 22,000 people, 1,200 to 2,000 people. Our poll was 26,000 people. It costs almost $200,000 of the value of this poll. Other people would charge $500,000 for it. It is so large that it has virtually a zero margin of error. And that poll shows, we did head-to-head races, and that poll shows that in a head-to-head race, I beat President Trump narrowly, and that I beat President Biden in a landslide. That that the poll also shows that whether I'm in the race or I'm out of the race, President Biden cannot win the race. And in fact, President Trump wins 2 extra states if Maryland or Virginia and Maine, if I drop out of the race. But the poll shows me that the first time in history in head-to-head races, a third-party candidate beating the candidates of both political parties. And that's unprecedented.
Here you are. And you put this open letter out. Have you heard back from the Trump campaign?
We have not heard from him yet, but we hope to hear from him, and I hope to see him at the Libertarian Convention. The other news that we have is we got on the ballot in the state of Delaware. So we now have sufficient signatures for 11 states. We're getting 2 or 3 states a week, and we'll continue doing that until we have all 50. We will be on all 50 by July. And something that, again, has never been done with this many, a million signatures. We're going to get almost 2 million. We're going to get about double what we need to give us a big cushion, because the DNC and the RNC are both trying to throw us off the ballot because they don't want to have this contest. And then, the last piece of news is that we put out 2 days ago, we put the Super PAC, Kennedy, the American Values Super PAC, put out a 30-minute video called Who is Bobby Kennedy? It's narrated by Woody Harrelson. It's a very, very powerful video, and it already has 100 million views. Both Facebook and Instagram have been actively censoring the video. They've been removing it from people's platforms, and now they continue. Now we've called their attention and threatened litigation. They've allowed people to actually post it, but they are shadow banning it and slow walking it. So we're looking at our litigation options right now, but over 100 million people have now seen that video.
So I want to get to that in a second. It's a great video, by the way. I've watched it in full. Back to the debate, and we'll get the other. You sure you want to debate Donald Trump? I mean, there are stages littered with political careers everywhere in the aftermath of people wanting to debate Donald Trump. The guy's a master debater without a question. You up for that? You ready for that?
I am, and I agree with you. I think President Trump is arguably, well, he's certainly the best debater in modern political history. I would say since my uncle. My uncle was also a very good debater, and who knows, what would have happened if my uncle had come across Donald Trump. I can't imagine it, but you could argue that he's the best debater since the Lincoln-Douglas debate. He's gone through, as you know, in 2016, he went through 16 opponents and, left them all in mayhem.
Is now calling for Biden to step aside. Are Democrats starting to turn on Biden?
Should Joe Biden run again?
No. Democrats say they want someone other than Biden.
Michigan has thousands of people voting uncommitted.
You're even seeing women and independent voters turning away from Joe Biden.
Raise your hand if you think Trump's policies on the economy would be better for your family.
That's a 9-point Trump advantage with independent voters.
President Biden trailing in 6 out of the 7 swing states.
Steve, how worried should President Biden be? And I don't see how it's even possible.
Do you think that President Biden is doing a good job with the economy?
No, he's not doing nothing.
Trump made the economy better, and Biden is making it worse.
Biden appears to be losing popularity.
President Biden losing support amongst black men.
I'm here to support President Trump. He's done so much for the black community.
And you ain't black.
Latino voters, he is still going to have to work very hard for their support.
Crime, inflation, this is weighing on their opinion of President Biden.
Latinos prefer former President Donald Trump over President Joe Biden.
The bleeding of support among Latino voters.
We once had a president that secured our southern border. We had a president that created a record-breaking economy. We had a president that supported our law enforcement officers. We had a president that created world peace through the Abraham Accords. And most important of all, We had a president that was respected on the world stage. The only thing Joe Biden has that Trump doesn't have is a voter problem.
A moment ago, you said you essentially see Trump and Biden as the same, different issues. But do you really believe that when people talk about the threat to democracy that Trump poses, do you really think that that is an equal evil to Biden?
I mean, listen, I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech, so to censor his opponent. I can say that because I just won a case in the Federal Court of Appeals and now before the Supreme Court. It shows that he started censoring not just me. 37 hours after he took the oath of office, he was censoring me. No president in the country has ever done that. The greatest threat to democracy is not somebody who questions election returns, but a president of the United States who used the power of his office to force the social media companies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, to open a portal and give access to that portal to the FBI, to the CIA, to the IRS, to CISA, to NIH, to censor his political critics. President Biden, for the first president in history, to use his power over the Secret Service to deny Secret Service protection to one of his political opponents for political reasons. He's weaponizing the federal agencies. Those are really critical threats to democracy.
Donald Trump, of course, tried to overturn a free and fair election. He tried to overturn one, right? He's still fighting in court.
Yes.
How is that not a threat to democracy?
Well, I think that is a threat to democracy. If him trying to overthrow the election clearly is a threat to democracy. But the question was, who is a worse threat to democracy? And what I would say is, I'm not going to answer that question, but I can argue that President Biden is, because the First Amendment, Aaron, is the most important. Adams and Hamilton and Madison said, we put the guarantee of freedom of expression in the First Amendment because all of our other constitutional rights depend on it. If you have a government that can silence its opponent, it has license for any atrocity.
So just to be clear, you're saying you could make an argument that President Biden is a worse threat to democracy than Donald Trump. That's what you just said.
But who else has ever tried to send, what president in history has ever tried to censor political opponents? What president has weaponized the federal agency? When my father came into the Justice Department, the first week he was there, he got all of the branch and division attorneys together, and he said, whatever we do, we are not going to use the power of the Justice Department for political reasons.
Trump, of course, has said that he would do that. He has said that he would do that.
Of course, and that is reprehensible.
And he is the only president who's tried to overthrow the results of an election.
Well, let me say something about that. I'm not going to defend President Trump on that. That was appalling. And there's many things that President Trump has done that are appalling. But in 2001, we had an election stolen in this country during the Bush-Gore election. In 2004, I wrote an award-winning article for Rolling Stone that showed how that election was stolen from John Kerry. So I don't think, and most Americans agree with me about 2001, that it was a stolen election from the Democratic Party candidate. So I don't think people who say that the election is stolen, not that we shouldn't make pariahs of those people. We shouldn't demonize them. We shouldn't vilify them. What we should be doing is saying, let's all get together, Republicans and Democrats, and fix the election system so that it cannot be fixed, so that we're the exemplary democracy of the world. We ought to, Las Vegas, let me tell you this, Las Vegas is built on machines that can count and never make mistakes. Can't we make an election machine, and can't we have an electoral process that every American says whatever happens?
Okay, hold on. But
it can't be fixed.
I understand that we want elections to be as perfect as they possibly can be,
Yeah.
and one should not use the fact that the election was not stolen and was not cheated to not try to perfect it. I understand that distinction. But when you do as you're doing, and you open the door to, well, we want every machine, you're opening the door to people who can say, well, then that's exactly what I'm saying. The machines miscounted, the machines did this, but they didn't. Every single analysis has shown that that did not happen, right? As you know, Do you worry that you're opening the door for
Well,
people to
no,
believe this?
I'm
Look at the
not-
Republican
listen,
primary voters and that they believe.
I'm not worried.
Trump won.
I don't worry about how people might misinterpret my words. What I said, I mean, and I'm careful about how I use language. Oh, I'm not saying that election was that there was cheating. I've never said that. What I've said is that there are problems, particularly, Aaron, if you don't have paper ballots. The election machines can be fixed in various ways, and that's just a fact. What we ought to have is we ought to have machines, and we ought to have paper ballots at the same time, and we ought to have a very low threshold to get a recount of the paper ballots, and that just makes sense. It's common sense, but if we implement that in every jurisdiction, you're not going to have problems where Americans at each other's throats.
I mean, so you're talking about a
fixing the
technical thing, like instead of having 0.5% be the trigger for a recount, you would put it even lower. I mean, that's the sort of reforms you're talking about here.
Whatever. I'm not choosing a particular threshold, but a threshold that makes sense. That's a very low threshold where you get a recount if there's some question. So, and that's, I don't think I'm saying something that's controversial. I'm saying something that I think most Americans, virtually any American, would agree with. Let's have an election system that even 10% of the Americans who are crazy people, that even they won't question, because our election system is the best election system in the world. And nobody, Vermont, for example, has a very, very good election system. Nobody ever questions the Vermont election system. And we ought to be able to do the same thing in every state. We are supposed to be the template for democracy in every country in the world. Let's make sure we put a man on the moon. We've had all these accomplishments. Let's make sure we have a system that nobody is questioning, even crazy people.
People are always going to question it, though.
Well,
they're always going to question it, and that
you want to narrow the margin of people who are questioning it to as much as possible by giving nobody any kind of legitimate claim about it. And that's all I'm saying. And what I'm saying is I'm not saying that President Trump won the election or that President Biden. I've never said anything or suggested anything like that. All I'm saying is let's focus on the issues that bring people together, rather than constantly focusing on the polarization, on the issues that drive Americans apart and have us all at each other's throats with this very, very toxic polarization and demonization of each other.
So in Iowa, I had the biggest election victory in the history of, nobody's ever had a margin like I won. And in New Hampshire, I had the most votes in the history of the New Hampshire primary. That's a long time. That's many, many years, right? Many decades. She got trounced. She walks onto the stage, says, "Oh, this was a wonderful night," but it wasn't a wonderful night for her. It was a wonderful night for me. No, we're beating her very badly, and I hear we're beating her very much in South Carolina. And I tell you, Tim Scott has been better. I said, "You've been better for me than you've been for yourself." He became a dynamo. He was a little bit low key when he ran for himself. For me, he has been incredible. I mean, he's been so strong and wonderful.
One of you you're considering for vice president.
Well,
he's on the list.
One of a lot of names. We have a lot of great names. We have a lot of great Republicans, but I called him. I said, "You were much better for me than you were for yourself." He's done a very good job.
Let me ask you about the RNC. There's a lot of criticism. The fundraising is an issue. Hasn't been a good past couple election cycles at all. 2022 should have been far better than it was. I think we can all agree on that. Is it time for Ronna McDaniel to step aside?
Well, I think she knows that. I think she understands that. And, as far as me is concerned, as far as I'm concerned, I endorsed almost 100% of the Republicans that I endorsed win. And in the midterms, out of 253 endorsements, I won 222 races.
Congress ought to impeach crooked Joe Biden for attacking his political opponent by weaponizing the DOJ, FBI, and even local DAs and attorney generals against his opponent, me. They ought to do that. As Byron York, did you ever hear of Byron York? Great writer. From the Washington Examiner said, quote, "The Justice Department forbids prosecutorial interference with elections." Very simple. The guidelines are very clear. Now, he's just writing the rules. He's a great talent, and he's writing the rules, and he's quoting the rules because nobody knows them. Not even lawyers seem to know them. Federal prosecutors and agents may never select the timing of any action, including investigative steps, criminal charges, or statements, for the purpose of affecting any election or for the purpose of giving an advantage or disadvantage to any candidate or a political party. Now, so they're saying you can't be doing what they're doing to me now because we're in the midst of an election. We just had 3 beauties, and actually 4, including the islands. We won them all in landslides. You're not allowed to do what they're doing. You've got South Carolina coming up, Michigan coming up, and then Super Tuesday coming up in 2 weeks. And they want me so badly, these guys, because you know what? We're beating Biden we're clobbering this guy. Who the hell wouldn't? We're beating him. Prosecutor deranged Jack Smith is in a very big hurry. I mean, this guy is working so hard. He's a crooked guy, deranged Jack Smith. He's a prosecutor. They brought him out to try and do damage, and he's done a lot of damage to a lot of people, and he's been overturned by the United States Supreme Court unanimously. But he always fails because he goes too far. He's an animal. But he's not allowed to say why, but the reason has been obvious all along. He wants Trump to be tried and convicted so that we get hurt for the November 5th date. And he's not going to hurt us because this is my poll numbers today are much higher than they were 3 months ago because of this. Our poll, it's actually our poll because we're all in this thing together. We're all in this mess together. We're going to straighten this country out. We cannot let this injustice stand. And that's why I will fight crooked Joe Biden's weaponized persecution at every step, and we will win. We're going to win. This is going to be the biggest win ever. This is going to be bigger than 2016. Be bigger than 2016.
In his only television interview for The Political Perspective today is independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Welcome. It's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. Let's start with the Federal Reserve, Robert, and you need to tell us and the viewers, potential voters maybe, how you view the Fed and its success in bringing down inflation since a year ago, March.
And thanks, Liz, for having me. I'm really happy to be here on this show. I'm happy that the inflation rate appears to be at least temporarily under control. But inflation is the most pernicious and insidious regressive tax on the poor. But high interest rates are also an enormous tax on the poor. The access to capital now that I'm seeing in poor neighborhoods all over the country is bankrupting small business in those neighborhoods. Our kids cannot get into a home because the interest rates have gone from 3% 2 years ago to, for them, the real cost about 7.5 or 8% inflation to buy a home. And the cost of housing has gone from $215,000 average cost in this country to $400,000. So you have an entire generation of kids that is not getting into homes. The long-term issue is spending, because inflation and high interest rates are just symptoms. They're just medicine, and they both are poisonous medicines. And so we need to get spending under control. We need to dramatically reduce the military spending. War in Ukraine is we've already committed $113 billion to that. President Biden wants to raise the stakes $200 billion. We've wasted $8 trillion on useless wars over 20 years that have made Americans less safe abroad and at home and are bankrupting our country. We need to also get healthcare costs under, and nobody's under control. That's the biggest cost, $4.3 trillion a year. Nobody's talking about that except for me, and I'm the one who can bring those healthcare costs under control.
Hold on. To be fair, President Biden has talked about attacking, high drug prices. Bernie Sanders just last week came out and said he was ready to subpoena 3 big pharma company CEOs because he's infuriated that the United States consumers are paying 10 times what France is paying. I mean, it's These are developed countries, forget Africa. So there are people out there that are trying to work on this. How would you tackle something like that?
Well, yeah, and those are good starts to start standing back against pharmaceutical companies that now own Congress and own the regulatory agencies. But the biggest thing we need to do is to reduce the chronic disease epidemic. And when my uncle was president, we were paying in 1960, 63, we were paying about 4% of GDP on healthcare. Today, it's 20%. And the principal addition is chronic disease. So we've gone up to $4.3 trillion a year. We spend more than any other per capita nation in the world. We have the worst health outcomes. Why is that? Because we, the United States of America, has the highest chronic disease burden of any country in the world. We have neurological disease, obesity, autoimmune diseases that suddenly appeared in the 1990s and that are now the principal cause. 93% of Medicare bills are chronic disease. And, you know, we have the highest death rate during COVID. We had 16% of the COVID deaths. We only have 4.2% of the world population. So why is that? Well, CDC says because we have the highest chronic disease rate. So that's the real pandemic. And NIH will not do those studies to find out. We know these are environmental toxins that are causing this.
Well, can I interrupt you? Because I'm looking right now as a business network, I'm looking right now and the stock market is going down. They want more punch bowl filling. They would like to see rates cut so that the money to borrow for whatever growth, whatever it is, becomes cheaper. And today, Jay Powell said, no, that is not going to happen. You know, I've seen some of your opinions on the Federal Reserve and specifically say, for example, the US dollar, Bitcoin, and how you would enable no taxes for people who make money off Bitcoin. And on top of everything else, you have also specifically said that you propose this idea to back the dollar with Bitcoin, beginning, though, with a very small number of treasuries. That's a very complicated issue, considering Bitcoin is incredibly volatile in price, although people are now getting to invest in it due to the Bitcoin spot ETFs.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we need to fix the Fed. We need to return U.S. sovereignty to the Fed. We need to return transparency to the Fed. We need to make the Fed more responsive to the markets and more responsive to the 12 regional banks, rather than have the kind of voodoo that now dictates Fed policy, and that is designed really to shift wealth upward to this new oligarchy of billionaires. In terms of my proposals, what I said is that I don't propose that all transactions in Bitcoin be untaxed, but that there be a cap to up to a certain amount. If you allow big holders like BlackRock to escape taxation on the increases in value for Bitcoin, you'd give a windfall of trillions of dollars to the richest people in our country, which they don't need. But people who have small transactions are buying gasoline or buying who are using it. We want to encourage people to use hard currency in the marketplace. My other proposal is very, very modest, which is that we use a basket of hard currencies, including platinum, including gold, and including perhaps Bitcoin, as a basis for maybe 1% of certain classes of T-bills, and see what happens. See if that has any capacity to inject discipline onto inflationary policies.
Join us now with his plan to fix it, independent presidential candidate RFK Jr.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
It's great to have you. When you see something like that, you know, back in the day, it used to be hard to get in the country. And if they did get in the country, there'd be a Border Patrol person there saying, hey, stop, or you got to turn around. Now, can you explain what Joe Biden's doing?
I can't explain the rationale, and I've been down to the border. I spent 3 days in Yuma watching this, and I was astonished. Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. in the morning, I watched 300 people just walk across the border. There were buses that were bringing them up to the border that were owned by the Mexican drug cartel, 100 or 55 people in a bus. And I watched the first 110 people that came over were from West Africa. And I wasn't able to interview them. But then the second 2 buses that came in, I was able to interview all the people. And only 2 of them had asylum claims. Most of them were from Asia.
Right.
And it's astonishing that the Border Patrol is utterly demoralized. You could stop this very quickly. And there doesn't seem to be any interest in the Biden administration doing it. Last month, Steve, we hit a record of 247,000 migrants arrested, which means many more were coming across.
Right.
So, it's not sustainable. Our country, we've already absorbed 7 million people in the last 3 years. And the pilot, whatever they're thinking is wrong. It's insane.
If you were elected president, how would you fix it?
I would stop it overnight. I've talked to the patrol. I've talked to law enforcement. What we need to do is to complete the 27 gaps in the wall. You don't need a wall from Brownsville, Texas, 2,200 miles to San Diego, but you need the physical barrier in those highly populated zones where migrants can disappear very quickly. So there's 27 big gaps where everybody's coming through. In the rural areas, you need to restore the fences that were torn up by the administration. You need to put in the long-range cameras, the lights, the sensor equipment, and then we need asylum judges on the border to adjudicate the cases there. And we need to reinstate the Migrant Protection Act that requires people with asylum claims to remain in Mexico. All those claims are adjudicated.
And that would stop the flow immediately.
Yeah.
President, will you pardon Peter Navarro?
He was treated very unfairly, a great patriot, a great negotiator for our country. He did a tremendous job with respect to China and trade, and they treated him very badly. The Biden administration treated him very, very badly. It's a shame, but that's the way it is. They treated him very, very badly.
Will Paul Manafort come back to your campaign, sir?
I don't know anything about it, but he was another person that was treated badly, and he was a patriot. But we'll see what happens with that. We have a lot of people involved in the campaign that have done a tremendous job, and based on the polls, we're doing extremely well. Extremely well.
Mrs. Trump, are you going to return to the campaign trail with your husband? Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Are you confident that you can take it?
I built a great company, one of the greatest companies anywhere in the country, especially when it comes to real estate. Have some of the greatest assets in the world. And this is a rigged trial. This was a rigged trial by a crooked judge and a crooked attorney general. And we're fighting it out with them. We have a lot of cash and we have a great company, but they want to take it away, or at least take the cash element away. Billions of dollars in value, billions of dollars in properties, but they'd like to take the cash away so I can't use it on the campaign. And this is just a corrupt group of people. It's election interference, and we'll see how the courts rule on it. And I'll be guided. Excuse me. I'll be guided by the courts. I think that the Democrats have been very, very opposed to Jewish people. That's true, and to Israel. All you have to do is look at Senator Schumer. What he did with Israel is a disgrace. And I think Israel will probably not forget it very soon. It's a very sad situation.
Do you think the 16-week abortion ban is smart? Do you think
Say it what? Oh, I couldn't care less. We need patriots. We need strong people in our country. Our country's going downhill very fast, very rapidly. Millions of people coming across the border, coming from jails, from prisons, coming from mental institutions and insane asylums, terrorists. We need strong people in this country. We don't need weak people.
Do you think a 16-week abortion ban is smart?
We'll be talking about that soon.
How soon?
We'll be talking about it very soon.
Are you going to serve too much voters, Mr. President?
Well, we're doing very well with the Jewish voter, it looks like, and we should do very well. If you look at all of our presidents, they're saying Trump was the best for Israel, by far the best for Israel. And we're doing very well with the Jewish vote, as you can see in the polls.
You think the Biden administration should continue?
They have to close the borders. Our country is dying. Our country is being overridden. This is an invasion. Our country is being invaded by people nobody even knows who they are, where they come from. Millions of people. I predict 15 million people within a short period of time. Probably have 15 million people already. That's bigger than most states. And these people come from the wrong places. They're coming from very bad places. There's no checks. There's no balances. It's a disgrace. What's happening to our country is a disgrace. We have to close the border. Let people come in, but they have to come in legally.
Mr. President, how will you conduct a mass deportation?
Say it.
How will you conduct a mass deportation?
That'll be very evident. It'll go very quickly. I will tell you that. It'll go to deportation. We're going to get the criminals out of our country right away. Our country is being invaded, and many of these people are criminals. They're criminals. How can anybody do this? There's never been a president that's done such harm to a country as this president has done to our country. He's the worst president we've ever had, and I'm looking forward to November 5th. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. I voted for Donald Trump. Yeah. Did somebody just say, who'd you vote for? Yeah, I voted for Donald Trump. Thank you.
Thank you, Trump. We love you.
We've got another tragic story connected to the border crisis. Travis Wolf was just one day away from celebrating his 12th birthday when a woman who was in the United States illegally from Venezuela crashed head-on into his family's Jeep.
Church teacher accused of abusing several children in Montgomery County, Maryland. Tonight, immigration officials tell us he was never supposed to be in the United States in the first place, and he had already been deported twice.
Palm Beach County deputies arrested 3 undocumented immigrants in Lake Worth Beach on sexual battery charges. According to the arrest affidavit, the 3 suspects, all from Guatemala, abducted a local woman along the street and threw her inside a truck. Authorities say the men drove off and stopped at a nearby intersection where they sexually assaulted her and filmed it. The leader of a Colombian street gang, Los Antañas, has been arrested in Texas, where he was seeking asylum. Colombian authorities confirmed that he was one of the 7 most wanted murderers in Colombia's capital.
A woman accused in Mexico of several murders and body dismemberments, even removing victims' hearts, is arrested in El Paso. The FBI says Pineda was known for extreme brutality, dismembering bodies, removing hearts, and placing the hearts in front of Santa Muerte statues.
Is it fair to believe that you would have a number of your former officials in your new cabinet?
I will put some back. I'll tell you, I came to Washington having spent almost no time in my life in Washington.
I know. You said
and all of a sudden I'm president. And I wasn't into Washington society. So I was not a Washington. I was a New York person. I was a New York builder.
Well, you were an outsider, and that's why
I was a
think they had
totally
an
outsider.
interview.
But the one problem with that, and I love the outsider thing, but you don't know people. So you're relying on other people to give you names to be the head of this, head of that. And by the way, we had unbelievable people. We had to look, I rebuilt
Yeah,
the
but your
military.
critics say you had plenty of personnel mistakes.
No, of course, but everybody does. Obama had. What about Biden? Look at the people running this Biden thing. The difference is I fire people. I fired Comey. I got rid of him.
You didn't fire Christopher Wray.
Well,
You hired him.
you know what? At the time, I don't know. Let's see what the final judgment is. But I didn't fire Christopher Wray. I didn't fire people I would have, but I fired a lot of people. You know, I had turnover. They have no turnover right now.
How do you know if you get back in, you don't have a network of people around you working against you.
I will, and so will anybody else that gets in as a Republican. These people are sick. These are sick people.
But do you feel better this time around because you know what to expect?
Well, I also know people that I didn't know before. I know now the smart ones. I know the dumb ones. I know the weak ones and the strong ones. I know tremendous amounts of people that I know will do a great job. But I was different. When I didn't like a job that somebody was done, I fired them, just like The Apprentice. I said, you're fired. You have to go.
What about some of your former officials? Do you see them being in this next cabinet? Mike Pompeo, for example.
I don't know.
John Ratcliffe?
He's fantastic. I mean, he's a great guy. John Ratcliffe has done a great job. Yeah.
Dr. Ben Carson?
He's done a fantastic job.
So you're expecting them to be in your cabinet?
Some of them, yeah. I mean, if somebody did a good job, I would do that, yeah.
Welcome back. President Trump is about to take a larger role within the Republican National Committee as he pursues the GOP nomination for president. In this exclusive interview, I asked the 45th Commander-in-Chief about some of his former
70% of the votes cast for Nikki Haley. Did anybody ever hear of her? Bird brain. Nikki. You know, the Republican Party wanted to nominate me and just say, skip the whole thing, and we're just going to give you our nomination. I said, don't do that. Don't do that. I want to win it the fair way. Pretty easy way, because we're leading by so much. But over 70% of the votes cast for Nikki Haley on Tuesday came from outside of the Republican Party. They came from outside. She got about 24%, 25% Republican votes because they had liberals interfering on behalf. They had Democrats voting. They had everybody voting, and we still won by a lot. That was the one shot. The message from the voters of our party is clear. It's time to finish this primary and get going.
Good-looking people. Wow. That was worth it. And I love doing that like you have. That's beautiful. Wow. It's art, right? So can I have 30 milkshakes and also some chicken? We're going to take care of the customers. Is business good? We're making a lot of money? Everyone can get rich, right? Thanks very much. Look at the way you hold. You like each other, right? I think that's very nice. Have a good time. Nice to see you. Thank you very much. So we'll order 30 milkshakes. We'll give them out to the people, and we'll take some for ourselves. Okay? Thank you very much, everybody.
30 milkshakes.
Hello.
This has got a great American franchise, Chick-fil-A.
It is. It's a great franchise. The owner is a great man who's a member of one of my clubs, and he's fantastic. And yeah, they do very well. They're closed on Sunday.
It's the Lord's Chicken.
That's the Lord's Chicken. You're right. It's good chicken too.
Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Both candidates will clinch their party's nomination in the three primaries that are being held today and will be entering the general election. And I would hope that both of these candidates will debate. We should start talking about the issues that concern Americans, the chronic disease epidemic, the destruction of our soils, the forever wars.
We do have to get in on that debate. You have to get in on that debate.
As you probably heard 2 days ago, we won everything in the Virgin Islands, a nice place, beautiful place. Would you like to go sometime? We'll all go together.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Hiller, and I'm the Director of Content at Team Kennedy. And today we're going to be talking about numbers.
Nerd alert!
All right, by now you probably know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is running as an independent candidate for President of the United States. But you probably have heard him spoken about like this.
A spoiler candidate? A spoiler.
Spoiler.
Called Kennedy a spoiler.
A spoiler.
But is this really true? I mean, is Bobby really a spoiler in this election? We looked into it, and now we have the answers. Now, the preface here is that most polls are conducted by mainstream media outlets, and typically they have 1,000 to 3,000 or so respondents per poll. And most of those polls have about a plus or minus 3% margin of error. Well, we conducted a nationwide poll of over 25,000 respondents, and our margin of error was 0.6%. That makes it by far the most accurate predictor of the 2024 election that we have thus far. All right, let's dive into the maps. This is the head-to-head matchup between Biden and Trump. Trump with 294 and Biden with 244. Trump wins by 50 electoral votes. And if you're a political nerd like myself, you know that that is not very close. And with Bobby as a third-party candidate, Biden only picks up 2 additional states, so he still loses to Trump. All right, now here is where it gets very interesting. In a head-to-head matchup, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wins 367 electoral votes versus Joe Biden's 171. Now that is what we call a landslide. And what's even crazier about these numbers is when you look at the ad spend of these two campaigns. Biden has spent over $36 million in advertising since October 1st, and we have spent a little over $2 million. Now, the next head-to-head matchup that we pulled was Bobby versus Trump. Obviously, this is a very close election, but Bobby still wins. All right, so to recap, Biden cannot beat Trump in a head-to-head race, and it is not close. Biden cannot beat Trump in a 3-way race, and it's still not very close. Bobby wins in a landslide against Biden head-to-head, and Bobby beats Trump head-to-head. So wait, who is actually the spoiler here? Because a spoiler is a non-winning candidate whose presence on the ballot affects which candidate wins. A non-winning candidate affecting a possible winning candidate. So if you do not want to see Donald Trump become the next president of the United States, there is only one candidate running who has the power to beat him, and it is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Brentwood home of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You can see it sprawling down below here. This is where an intruder was arrested after twice trespassing on the gated property. Police say the suspect climbed over the fence yesterday morning, was arrested, released only to return again. He is being held on $30,000 bail. It's not known if Kennedy was home at the time. Kennedy, an independent presidential candidate, has refused Secret Service protection. He's asked for it, and it hasn't been given to him. However, his personal security team had told the Secret Service the suspect has been obsessed with Kennedy.
An intruder detained at the LA home of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Police telling ABC News they responded to the home yesterday morning. This after security at the home detained a man wearing a green shirt. Officers took the suspect into custody and transported him to the West LA station, where he was cited and released per the county's new no cash bail policy. It is the latest scare for the presidential candidate. An intruder was reportedly arrested at Kennedy's home over the summer. And last month, the man allegedly tried to pose as law enforcement at one of his events.
Hello, I'm Mark Brown. Get more great ABC7 content by clicking the subscribe button for our YouTube channel and download the ABC7 Los Angeles streaming app on Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, and Roku to watch on your TV.
Cops have released the name of the man as Jonathan Matched and say he was served with an emergency protective order after he was cited for the first trespass arrest. He then violated that order when he returned, getting arrested for the violation as well as trespassing again. Kennedy's campaign just put out a statement about the incident, saying the man gained access to his property after climbing a fence and asked to speak with Kennedy. The statement also reveals Kennedy was home during the first and second incidents. What's more, Kennedy's team says they've alerted Secret Service about the obsessed individual several times in recent months, but Kennedy still hasn't gotten SS protection. Law enforcement sources tell TMZ the same guy returned to the home early Thursday morning around